The scream tore through the expensive silence of the Lekki penthouse. Chitty's hands trembled as he gripped his laptop, eyes locked on the security footage playing across the screen. 2:47 a.m. His wife Ngozi was in Abuja. The house was dark, except for the glow of his computer. On the screen, his 6-year-old daughter Kamsi sat cross-legged on their Italian leather sofa, tears streaming down her face. 4-year-old Zola clutched his sister's arm, small body shaking. And there, standing before them both, was Folake, the nanny they'd trusted for 3 months. But Folake wasn't comforting them. She was teaching them. Say it again. Folake's voice came through the speakers, firm but not cruel. Who are you? I don't know, Kamsi sobbed. Wrong. Folake knelt down, eye level with the children. You are Igbo. Your great-grandfather fought for this land. Your grandmother spoke 4 languages. You are not just Kamsi who lives in Lekki. You are the blood of warriors, farmers, storytellers. Now, who are you? Chitty's finger hovered over his phone. He should call the police. This was manipulation, indoctrination. This was, I am Igbo, Kamsi whispered, her tears still falling but her voice stronger. I am Igbo, Zola repeated, not understanding but believing. Folake pulled both children into her arms. Your parents have given you everything except yourselves, and someone had to give you that. Chitty closed the laptop, his heart hammered against his ribs, not with fear, but with something far more disturbing, recognition. Because 3 months ago, his daughter couldn't tell him the name of a single ancestor. She spoke English with an American accent from YouTube. She called jollof rice weird food. And now she was crying because she'd forgotten who she was. Or had she? Had she ever known? Chitty looked at the camera hidden in the bookshelf across his study, its tiny red light blinking in the darkness. These cameras were supposed to reveal danger. Instead, they revealed something unthinkable. Hello, guys. Welcome to my African Tales. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And most important thing, turn your notification bell so you can get informed when I drop another amazing story. Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. What would you do if your spouse tried to kill you and you survive? Will you take a revenge or disappear forever? The interview had lasted exactly 47 minutes, and Folake had answered every question perfectly. Why do you want to work with children? Ngozi had asked, her lawyer's eyes sharp and assessing. Because children are the only honest thing left in this world. Folake replied, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was 53, with graying braids pulled into a bun, and the kind of face that looked like it had seen both joy and sorrow in equal measure. They haven't learned to lie to themselves yet. Chitty had exchanged a glance with his wife. After 3 failed nannies in 6 months, one who'd spent more time on her phone than with the kids, another who mysteriously borrowed Ngozi's jewelry, and a third who'd simply vanished one Tuesday afternoon, they were desperate. But desperation made you careless. And they couldn't afford careless. Not with Kamsi and Zola. Your references are impressive, Chitty said, scanning the papers again. Mrs. Aladil speaks very highly of you. And the Bamadils. I know them. Good family. I worked with the Bamadils for 4 years, Folake confirmed. Until their children went to university in London. And you never wanted children of your own? Ngozi asked. It wasn't really appropriate, but she asked anyway. Something flickered in Folake's eyes, brief as lightning. I had a daughter once. She would have been 28 now. The silence that followed was heavy. Neither Chitty nor Ngozi pressed further. The position includes accommodation, Chitty said finally, clearing his throat. The attached room behind the kitchen. 6 days a week, Sundays off. The children's schedule is demanding. Swimming lessons, French tutor, piano, chess club. Perhaps they have too many lessons, Folake interrupted quietly. Ngozi stiffened. Excuse me? Forgive me. Folake's expression remained calm. I only mean that children also need time to simply be children. To play, to discover, to breathe. Chitty should have caught it then, that gentle challenge, that quiet conviction. But instead, he'd found himself nodding. She's right, he'd murmured, ignoring Ngozi's sharp look. We had been pushing them hard. 2 days later, Folake moved into the modest room behind their state-of-the-art kitchen, bringing only 2 suitcases and a wooden box she wouldn't explain. The first morning, Chitty found her in the kitchen at 6 a.m., preparing breakfast. Not the usual cereal and toast, but something that made his childhood flash before his eyes. Akara, fresh and golden, the scent of ground beans and pepper filling the air. "My mother used to make these," he'd said, startled. Folake had smiled, small, knowing. "I know." He should have asked what she meant. But Kamsi had come running in, still in her pajamas, shouting about the funny pancakes, and the moment passed. That was how it started. Small things. Traditional foods appearing at breakfast. Yoruba words slipping into conversations. Folake teaching Zola a hand-clapping game that Chitty vaguely remembered from his own childhood in Enugu, before his father's oil money had moved him to Lagos, before international schools and business degrees, and forgetting, always forgetting. The children loved her immediately. Within a week, Zola was calling her Mama Folake. Within 2 weeks, Kamsi was asking why they never visited their grandmother's village. Within 3 weeks, his children seemed happier than they'd been in months, laughing more, fighting less, speaking with strange new confidence. "She's wonderful," Ngozi had admitted one night, her face lit by her laptop as she prepared for another trial. "The kids are thriving. We actually made the right choice for once." Chitty had agreed. Of course he'd agreed. But late at night, when the massive house fell silent, except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of Lagos traffic, a question nagged at him. If everything was so perfect, why did he feel like he was losing something? The answer would come 3 months later, on the hidden cameras he hadn't yet installed, revealing a truth he wasn't prepared to face. His children were changing. And maybe, just maybe, they needed to. The first Real warning came on a Tuesday evening in September. Chitty arrived home at 7 p.m., early for him, and found Kamsi in the living room, sitting perfectly still with her eyes closed, not watching TV, not playing with her tablet, just sitting. "Kamsi? Baby, what are you doing?" Her eyes opened slowly. "Mama Folake says we must learn to be quiet, to listen to ourselves." "Listen to yourselves?" Chitty frowned. "Where's Mama Folake?" "Kitchen, making dinner." Kamsi tilted her head. "Papa, do you know what your chi is?" "My what?" "Your chi. Your personal god. Mama Folake says every Igbo person has one, but most people forget to listen." Chitty's briefcase slipped slightly in his grip. That's just folklore, sweetheart. Old stories. Mama Folake says you would say that." Kamsi stood, smoothing her dress with a gesture that seemed too old for 6. "She says your generation was taught to be ashamed." The words hit him like a slap. Before he could respond, Zola came running in, singing something in broken Igbo, words Chitty barely understood himself. That night, after the children were asleep, he mentioned it to Ngozi over video call. "She's teaching them about culture," Ngozi said, distracted, paper spread across her hotel desk. "That's good, isn't it? Better than that nanny who had them watching American cartoons all day." But Kamsi used the word ashamed. "About me. About us." "Chitty, you're being paranoid." Ngozi rubbed her temples. "We hired her to care for the kids. They're healthy, happy, well-fed. Isn't that what matters?" He wanted to argue, but his wife looked exhausted, and he couldn't quite articulate the unease crawling beneath his skin. The changes accelerated. Kamsi stopped asking for chicken nuggets and started requesting dishes Chitty hadn't eaten since childhood. Ofe and Sala, Ukwa, Abacha, foods his mother used to make before she passed, before his father remarried a woman who preferred continental cuisine. Zola began speaking with proverbs, actual proverbs. "Papa, when the moon is shining, the cripple becomes hungry for a walk," said with complete seriousness when Chitty suggested they drive instead of walking to the neighborhood park. "Where did you learn that?" Chitty asked, bewildered. "Mama Folake. She knows all the old words." The old words. As if his children were archaeologists excavating a buried civilization, except that civilization was his own heritage. At Kamsi's school, her teacher called. "Mr. Chitty, I want to discuss Kamsi's recent behavior." His heart dropped. Is something wrong? Not wrong, exactly. Just different. She corrected me yesterday during social studies. I was teaching about Nigerian independence, and she raised her hand and said, I'm quoting, "My great-great-grandfather was at the Constitutional Conference of 1957. His name was Chief Emeka Okiri. He spoke 3 languages and fought the British with words, not weapons." Chitty sat down slowly. And did she? I mean, was she correct? I looked it up. She was absolutely right. Mr. Chitty, how does a 6-year-old know her family history 4 generations back? I don't know. But he did know. Folklore. It was always Folklore. That evening, he stood outside the kitchen, listening. Inside, Folklare's voice rose and fell like a song. Your name, Kamsi, means who is greater than God. Your brother's name, Zola, means quiet, peaceful. But do you know what your father's name means? What? Both children asked in unison. Chitty means God exists. Your father's name is a prayer, a testimony. But I wonder if he remembers that. Chitty's hand froze on the doorframe. Why doesn't Papa speak Igbo? Kamsi asked. Because he was taught that English would take him higher. And it did. But sometimes when we climb, we forget to bring our roots with us. And a tree without roots, no matter how high, will eventually fall. Zola's small voice. Is Papa falling? No, my dear. But he's swaying. And maybe he needs his children to remind him where he comes from. Chitty backed away silently, his heart pounding. He went to study, closed the door, and sat in the dark. His phone buzzed. His business partner tunned. Bro, those security cameras I told you about, I can have them installed this weekend. Just for peace of mind. You can't be too careful these days. Chitty stared at the message for a long time. Folklore hadn't done anything wrong. The children were fine. Better than fine. So why did he feel like his home had been infiltrated? Why did he feel like a stranger in his own house? His fingers moved across the screen. Yes, this weekend. Don't tell anyone. 3 days later, 5 cameras were hidden throughout the house. Living room, playroom, kitchen, hallway, children's bedroom door. Just until I understand what's happening, he told himself. But deep down, he already knew he wouldn't like what he found. Not because Folklore was hurting his children, but because she was healing them from a wound he'd inflicted without realizing it. The wound of disconnection, of rootlessness, of growing up rich but culturally poor. And that truth, that was more terrifying than any abuse. Because it meant the problem wasn't Folklore. It was him. The cameras recorded for 7 days before Chitty found the courage to watch. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Ngozi was in Abuja, again. The house was silent. Chitty sat in his study with a glass of whiskey he wouldn't drink and a laptop screen that felt like a confessional. He clicked on Monday's footage. Breakfast, 7:15 a.m. Folklore stood at the stove, flipping Accra. Kamsi and Zola sat at the kitchen table, sleepy but attentive. Do you know why I make this for you? Folklore asked, her back to the camera. Because it's yummy? Zola offered. Because it connects you. Folklore turned, holding the plate. Every time you eat Accra, you're eating what your great-grandmother ate, what her mother ate. Food is memory, children. When you forget the food, you forget the people. Chitty's finger hovered over fast forward, but he didn't press it. Tuesday, 3:30 p.m. Playroom. Kamsi struggled with homework, a worksheet about my family. The question, what makes your family special? I don't know what to write, Kamsi said, frustrated. Maya wrote that her family goes to Disneyland. Ahmed wrote that his dad has 3 cars. What do we have? Folklore knelt beside her. You have something none of them have. What? A story. A legacy. Folklore pulled out the mysterious wooden box Chitty had noticed on her first day. From it, she withdrew old photographs, sepia-toned, edges worn. Do you recognize these people? Kamsi shook her head. This woman, your father's grandmother. My friend, we grew up in the same village. She taught me everything I know. Folklare's finger traced a face in the photo. She could recite genealogy back 7 generations. She knew every plant in the forest and what it could heal. She survived a war, raised 9 children alone after her husband died, and built a school with her own hands. That's my great-grandma? Yes, and you have her eyes. Kamsi stared at the photo, then at Folake. Papa never told me about her, because he doesn't remember. Or perhaps he was never taught to value remembering. Chitty paused the video. His hand shook as he reached for the whiskey, and this time he drank. Wednesday, 5 p.m., living room. This was the footage that would haunt him. Both children sat before Folake, who held a talking drum. Where had she gotten that? This drum speaks, she said. In the old days, before phones, before even letters, we sent messages with drums. Different rhythms meant different things. She tapped a pattern. This says come home. This, another pattern, says danger. And this, a slow, mournful beat, says we remember you. Can you teach us? Kamsi asked, eyes wide. I can, but first, you must understand why it matters. Folake set the drum down. Your parents are good people. They work hard. They give you everything money can buy. But there's one thing they cannot give you, because they've lost it themselves. What? Zola whispered. Identity. The knowledge of who you are beyond this house, beyond Legos, beyond money. You are not just children who happen to be Nigerian. You are carriers of centuries. Warriors, farmers, storytellers, kings, queens. But if no one tells you this, if no one shows you, you'll grow up rich and empty. Kamsi's voice was small. Are Mama and Papa empty? Folake was quiet for a long moment. They're searching, child. They just don't know what they've lost yet. Then came Thursday, 8 p.m., the children's bedroom. Chitty hadn't realized Folake stayed this late. On the screen, she sat between both children on Kamsi's bed, a book in her lap, but not a printed book, a handwritten journal. These are the stories your father's mother told me before she died. She made me promise to write them down. She said, one day my grandchildren will forget where they came from, and someone will need to remind them. Did she know about us? Kamsi asked. She knew there would be children who needed finding. Folake opened the journal. Listen now. This is the story of how your ancestor defeated a leopard with only his voice. As she read, both children leaned against her, and Chitty saw something that made his chest ache. They looked at peace. Completely, utterly at peace. When the story ended, Kamsi asked, Mama Folake, why don't our parents tell us these things? And Folake's answer stopped Chitty's breathing. Because loving you means feeding you, clothing you, protecting you. But raising you, that means giving you roots. And your parents are so busy giving you wings. They forgot that birds without nests forget how to come home. I'm not trying to replace them. Children, I'm trying to build you a place to return to before you fly so far away. You forget there's ever anywhere to return to. Chitty closed the laptop. The whiskey glass slipped from his hand, amber liquid spreading across his desk like guilt. He'd spent his whole life climbing. Better schools, better jobs, better houses, better cars. He spoke English perfectly, with barely a trace of accent. He'd married a woman equally ambitious, equally modern. They'd built an empire. But what had they built it on? Nothing. Air. Forgetting. His mother had tried, in her last years, to teach Kamsi words in Igbo. He gently discouraged it. English is more useful, Mama. Let her focus on what will help her succeed. His father, before the dementia took him completely, had wanted to take the children to their ancestral village. Chitty had made excuses. Maybe next year, Papa. They have school activities. Next year never came. And now this woman, this stranger, was giving his children what he'd been too modern, too forward-thinking, too ashamed to give them. Themselves. Chitty's phone buzzed. Ngozi. Just landed. Exhausted. The trial is killing me. How are the kids? His fingers hovered over the keyboard. How could he explain? How could he tell his wife that their nanny was teaching their children to be proud of what they'd spent their whole lives trying to rise above? He typed, they're fine. We need to talk when you get home. But even as he sent it, He knew the conversation wouldn't be about firing Folake. It would be about something much more dangerous, admitting they'd lost themselves. And somehow, a stranger in their home was the only one who'd noticed. Chitty came home early on Friday, 3 p.m., claiming illness to his secretary. The sound of laughter drifted from the backyard. Real laughter, the kind that came from the belly, unself-conscious and pure. He found them beneath the mango tree. Folake, Kamsi, and Zola, sitting in a circle on a woven mat he'd never seen before. Folake was teaching them a game with stones, her hands moving in patterns, the children mimicking her with intense concentration. Bia and Wada M. Come, my child. Folake called to Zola, who dropped a stone. Patience. Your hands must learn to remember what your mind doesn't yet know. Chitty's shadow fell across the mat. All three looked up. Papa. Kamsi jumped up. Mama Folake is teaching us in Sicko. It's what you played when you were little. Had he? The memory was there, faint as smoke, his grandmother's compound, other children. Stones clicking against stones, laughter, children. Folake said quietly, Go inside and wash your hands. It's time for your snack. But now, please. Something in her tone, not harsh, but absolute, sent both children running. Chitty watched them go, marveling at how easily they obeyed her. They argued with him constantly. When they were alone, Folake began gathering the stones, placing them carefully in a leather pouch. How long have you been watching? She asked. Chitty's stomach dropped. What? The cameras. She looked up, her eyes steady. You installed them last weekend. One in the kitchen, behind the decorative bowl. One in the living room. The smoke detector that's never quite aligned properly. Should I continue? Heat flooded his face. You knew. I know what guilt looks like, Mr. Chitty. And I know what fear looks like. You've been carrying both. She stood, dusting off her wrapper. So, you've watched. What did you see? I saw. He struggled for words. I saw you teaching my children things I never taught them. Telling them things I never told them. Making them feel. Making them feel what? Connected. To something. To... He gestured helplessly. To things I don't even understand anymore. And this troubles you. Of course it troubles me. The words exploded out. You're here 3 months, and my daughter speaks Igbo better than I do. She knows her great-grandmother's name, knows proverbs I've forgotten, asks questions I can't answer. Then answer them. How? I don't. He stopped. I don't remember. My father wanted us modern, Western educated. We spoke English at home, ate foreign food, dressed in suits and dresses. He said tradition was what kept Nigeria backward, that to move forward, we had to let go of the past. And did it work? Folake's voice was gentle. Are you happy, Mr. Chitty? You who is everything. The question hit like a punch. He thought of his massive house that felt empty, his marriage that was more business partnership than love, his children who, 3 months ago, barely looked up from their tablets when he came home. My mother sent you, he said suddenly, the pieces clicking together. Before she died, she asked you to do this. Folake's expression shifted, surprise, then something like sorrow. How did you know? The journal, the photographs. You knew my grandmother, my mother's mother. His voice cracked. She died when I was 15. She tried to teach me things, stories, language, customs. But my father said it was old-fashioned, that I needed to focus on school, on getting ahead. And I listened to him. I stopped visiting her, stopped calling. And when she died, You inherited her regret, Folake finished softly. Your mother told me, at the end, she said, I watched my son become successful and my grandchildren become strangers. Someone has to say what we've lost. She made me promise. So this was a conspiracy. Bitterness edged his words. My own mother, your mother loved you enough to know you were drowning and didn't even realize the water was rising. Folake stepped closer. Mr. Chitty, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to make you feel ashamed. I'm here because your children deserve to know who they are, and because you Deep down, you know this too. But why this way? Why secretly? Why not just tell me? Would you have listened? Her eyebrows rose. If I'd said, your children need to learn Igbo, need to hear the old stories, need to understand where they come from, would you have agreed? Or would you have done what your father did? Smiled politely and said, maybe later, maybe someday. Someday, the word that meant never. Chitty sank on a garden bench, suddenly exhausted. On the cameras, Kamsi asked if I was empty. You said I was searching but didn't know what I'd lost. Do you? Folklore sat beside him. Do you know what you've lost? The sun filtered through the mango leaves, casting shadows that danced like memories. Chitty thought of his mother's funeral, how he'd stood dry-eyed and dignified while villagers he didn't know wailed and sang songs he couldn't understand. How foreign he'd felt in the place his ancestors had lived for centuries. Myself, he whispered. I've lost myself. Not lost, Folklore corrected. Buried. And buried things can be unearthed. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Your children are digging, Mr. Chitty. The question is, will you dig with them? Or will you bury them too? From inside the house, he heard Kamsi and Zola singing. A Igbo children's song, he vaguely remembered. Their voices were bright, unself-conscious, joyful. I don't know how, he admitted. I don't know where to start. Folklore smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Then it's lucky you have a good teacher. 3 of them, actually. She stood. Your children, Mr. Chitty. Let them teach you. They're learning faster than you did, because they haven't yet learned to be ashamed. As she walked back toward the house, Chitty called out, Folklore. She turned. Thank you for being what we needed, even though we didn't know we needed it. Tell your wife, Folklore said. She needs to hear this too, before she travels so far from herself that even a map can't bring her back. Then she was gone, leaving Chitty alone beneath the mango tree with the sound of his children's singing and the weight of generations pressing on his shoulders. Not crushing him, holding him up. Ngozi's flight landed at 9 p.m. Saturday. Chitty picked her up himself, no driver, and they drove through Lagos traffic in unusual silence. You said we needed to talk, she finally said, watching the city lights blur past. You're scaring me. Chitty, is it the kids? Are they sick? No. He searched for the right word. They're found. Found? What does that mean? I'll show you. At home, the children were already asleep. Folklore had left dinner warming on the stove. Of oha, rich and fragrant. Ngozi looked at it, surprised. When did you learn to make this? I didn't. Folklore did. He led her to his study. Sit, please. For the next hour, Ngozi watched the camera footage in silence. Chitty watched her face instead. The shock, the confusion, the dawning understanding, and finally, the tears. When the last video ended, the bedtime story about their ancestor and the leopard, Ngozi covered her mouth with both hands. Oh, God, she whispered. Oh, God. Chitty, what have we done? We gave them everything. Except themselves. She stood abruptly, pacing. We gave them private schools and swimming lessons and French tutors, but we can't tell them their own grandmother's name. We live in luxury, and our children don't know a single song from our village. Her voice broke. Do you remember when Kamsi's school had International Day last year? And she dressed as a British princess because she said Nigeria wasn't pretty enough? Chitty remembered. He laughed it off then, called it cute. I blamed the school, Ngozi continued, wiping her eyes. I blamed society. But it was us. We're the ones who made English the only language in this house. We're the ones who hired nannies who fed them pasta and pizza. We're the ones who... She stopped. I changed my accent in court. Did you know that? I make my voice sound more neutral, more international, because I think it makes me sound smarter. Ngozi, my own accent. She laughed bitterly, as if the way my mother spoke, the way her mother spoke, is something to be embarrassed about. She sank back into the chair. When did we start running from ourselves? When success meant forgetting, Chitty said quietly, when moving up meant moving away. They sat in silence, the weight of recognition settling over them like dust. "What do we do?" Ngozi asked finally. "I talked to Folake yesterday. She told me something." Chitty turned his laptop to face his wife. She's not just a nanny. She's a retired teacher, cultural education specialist. She's been doing this for years, going to wealthy Lagos families whose children are adrift. How many? 17 families. She works with them for 6 months to a year, teaching the children, documenting family histories, reconnecting them to their roots. Then she moves on. "So she's leaving?" Ngozi's voice was small. "In 3 months, yes. That was always the arrangement, apparently. My mother set it up before she died, paid Folake's fee in advance. 1 year, then she goes to another family that needs her." "Your mother knew," Ngozi whispered. "She knew we were losing ourselves. She tried to tell us. Remember? Bring the children to the village. Teach them the language. Don't forget." We smiled and nodded and did nothing. Ngozi stood, walked to the window overlooking their garden. Below, Folake's small room glowed with warm light. "So what do we do with the next 3 months?" "We learn," Chitty said. "All of us. Together. I've got 3 major trials coming up. Cancel one." She turned, shocked. "Chitty, cancel one. Take a leave. Ask for a delay. I don't care." He stood, facing her. "Ngozi, our daughter asked the nanny about her heritage because she couldn't ask us. Our son sings songs we don't know the words to. If we don't fix this now, if we wait until after these trials, after this quarter's earnings, after whatever excuse comes next, we won't fix it at all. You're asking me to choose between my career and my children. No, I'm asking you to choose between success and significance. We've achieved the first. But what's the point if our children grow up strangers to themselves? Strangers to us?" Ngozi's face crumpled. "I'm so tired, Chitty. I'm so tired of being perfect, of code switching and fitting in and being the right kind of Nigerian, not too ethnic, not too foreign. Just palatable, just successful. I don't know how to stop. Then let's learn together. Let's let our children teach us what Folake is teaching them." He crossed to her, took her hands. "We have 3 months, 90 days. Then Folake leaves and we're on our own. But maybe if we pay attention, if we actually try, we can learn enough to keep going. What if we fail? Then we fail. But at least we'll fail honestly, as ourselves." The next morning, Sunday, Folake's day off, Chitty and Ngozi sat their children down. "We need to apologize," Chitty began. Both kids looked confused. "For what?" Kamsi asked. "For not teaching you who you are," Ngozi said, her voice thick. "For being so busy giving you things that we forgot to give you: roots, history, identity." "But Mama Folake teaches us," Zola said simply. "We know, and we're grateful." Chitty glanced at Ngozi. "But we want to learn too. With you. Will that be okay?" Kamsi's eyes widened. "Really? You want to learn the old stories? The stories, the language, the food, the songs, everything." Ngozi reached out, pulled both children close. "We've been running for so long, we forgot to stop and look back. But you too, you're looking back. And we want to look with you." What followed was the strangest, most beautiful 3 months of Chitty's life. Folake became their teacher. All of them. Evenings were spent learning Igbo proverbs, practicing call and response songs, cooking traditional meals together. Weekends, they drove to the village, Chitty's ancestral home that he'd avoided for years, and walked the same red dirt paths his grandparents had walked. They were terrible at first. Chitty's Igbo was rusty and heavily accented. Ngozi burned the first 3 attempts at cooking egusi soup. They all laughed until they cried when Zola accidentally insulted an elder with the wrong tone of voice. But slowly, something shifted. Chitty found himself thinking in Igbo sometimes, words surfacing from memory he didn't know he had. Ngozi stopped changing her accent in court and won her biggest case yet. Kamsi wrote a school essay about her great-great-grandfather that made her teacher weep. And everywhere, In every corner of their lives, they found pieces of themselves they thought lost forever. One night, 2 weeks before Folake was scheduled to leave, the whole family sat in the living room. Chitty looked at the camera hidden in the smoke detector, still recording, and smiled. "Turn it off," Ngozi said, following his gaze. "What?" "The cameras. Turn them off. We don't need them anymore." She was right. The cameras had been installed out of fear. Fear of what they didn't know. Fear of losing control. But they weren't afraid anymore. They were present. Chitty disconnected the cameras that night. All of them. On Folake's last day, they held a small ceremony in the garden. The children cried. Ngozi cried. Even Chitty's eyes grew wet. "You saved us," he told Folake. "You gave us back what we'd lost." "No," Folake corrected, her own eyes bright. "I only showed you where you buried it. You did the digging yourselves." She looked at each of them. "Remember this. Culture is what you wear or what you eat or what language you speak. It's what you carry in your heart. It's the stories you tell, the values you live by, the connections you honor. You can live in Lekki or London or anywhere, as long as you know where home is." "And where is home?" Kamsi asked. Folake knelt, touched the child's chest. "Here, always here. In who you are, who you came from, who you choose to be." She stood. "And now you know. All of you know. So when the world tries to convince you that success means forgetting, you'll remember." After she left, Chitty found the wooden box on the kitchen counter. Inside, the journal of stories, the photographs, the talking drum, and a letter. "Dear Chitty and Ngozi, your children will teach other children. Your remembering will spark other remembering. This is how culture survives, not through museums or monuments, but through families choosing to carry it forward. Your mother would be proud." Folake. 6 months later, Chitty's company launched a new initiative, cultural education programs for employees' children. Ngozi started a mentorship group for young female lawyers, teaching them they could be successful without erasing themselves. And every Sunday, the family gathered, extended now, including cousins and aunts and uncles they'd reconnected with, to share meals, tell stories, and sing the songs that Folake had taught them to remember. The cameras stayed disconnected, because the unthinkable truth wasn't that they'd hired a stranger who infiltrated their home. It was that they'd become strangers in their own lives, and it took someone else to help them find their way back to their language, their culture, their roots, back to themselves. And that was worth more than any security footage could ever capture.